She called me the responsible one. Right up until the moment it was convenient to forget I existed. It was a Tuesday night in March, and my mother-in-law was standing at the head of a long dinner table in her sister's house in Naperville, Illinois, holding a glass of white wine and smiling at the room. There were maybe 20 people seated around her aunts, cousins, neighbors she'd known for 30 years. My husband was sitting 2 chairs to my left. I was sitting quietly, the way I always sat at these gatherings, watching, waiting for it to be over. She tapped her glass with a ring, the way people do when they want attention, and the room went soft. She said she wanted to say a few words about the house renovation that had just been completed. The kitchen, the back porch, the new hardwood floors running from the front door all the way to the rear bedroom. She said it had been a dream of hers for a long time, and that it finally happened because of the generosity of family. She looked around the room when she said that word. Family. Then she looked at my husband and smiled. Then she looked at his older brother Marcus, who was seated across from me, and she smiled at him too. She did not look at me. She raised her glass and said, "I want to thank the people in this room who showed up for me. Real family shows up. I've always known who those people are." I held my fork and said nothing. My husband reached over and touched my hand under the table. I don't know if it was because he understood what had just happened, or because he wanted me to stay quiet. Either way, I stayed quiet. I was good at that by then. I had been practicing for 3 years. Before I tell you what happened in the weeks after that dinner, I want to ask you something. What time is it where you are right now? Drop it in the comments, I always read them. Okay, let me go back to the beginning. Because the dinner table is not where this story starts. It starts about 37 months earlier, in a cramped apartment in Evanston, when my husband and I were still newlyweds, and his mother called him crying at 11 o'clock on a Thursday. My name is not important. What matters is that I was 28 years old. I had a full-time job as a software implementation specialist at a mid-sized logistics firm, and I had just 4 months before that phone call, signed my name on a mortgage with a man I loved and trusted completely. We had a plan. We had a savings account. We had a spreadsheet, because I have always had a spreadsheet. It is one of the things my husband found charming about me in the beginning, and one of the things that would later save both of us. The phone call was about the renovation loan. My mother-in-law had taken out a home improvement loan 18 months earlier to redo her bathroom and replace some rotting soffits on the roof. The monthly payment was not enormous. But she had retired early, her fixed income was limited, and she had gotten behind. 3 months behind. The bank had sent a notice. She was embarrassed, and she was scared, and she called her son at 11 at night, because that is what she did when she was embarrassed and scared. My husband came back to bed and explained the situation. He said he felt terrible. He said he didn't want her to lose the house. He said he thought maybe we could help with the loan payments for a few months until she stabilized. I asked how much. He told me. I was quiet for a moment. Then I said okay. A few months. I want to be clear about something, because the comments on videos like this one always ask the same question, and I want to answer it honestly. I was not naive. I was not a pushover. I was a woman who had watched her own parents struggle, and had decided very young that financial clarity was a form of love, that being honest about money was more respectful than pretending it didn't matter. I agreed to help, because I believed it was temporary. I believed in my husband. I believed that his family, once they understood we were not an unlimited resource, would respond with appropriate gratitude and restraint. I was wrong about the last part. The few months became 6 months. Then my mother-in-law mentioned that the kitchen was in bad shape, and that Marcus, my husband's older brother who was between jobs, was going to help gut it if someone could cover the materials. I heard this at Sunday dinner. It was presented not as a request, but as an update, the way someone might mention the weather. My husband looked at me across the pot roast. I looked back at him. We had a short conversation that night, in our kitchen, that ended with me transferring $1,400 to cover materials. Then Marcus needed a cosign on an apartment because his credit was not strong enough on its own. My husband did the cosign. I did not object, but I noted it. I kept notes on everything. Not because I was calculating or bitter. Because I had grown up in a house where money was chaos, and I had made a private promise to myself that my adult life would be different. The spreadsheet was not a weapon. It was just how I thought. By the end of our first year of marriage, we had contributed a total of $11,000 to my husband's family in various forms. Payments, materials, one emergency vet bill for his mother's dog, 2 months of Marcus's car insurance, when Marcus swore he'd pay it back. My husband knew the number because I showed it to him. He was uncomfortable with how specific I was about it. He said I was keeping score. I said I was keeping records. There is a difference. His mother was warm to me in those days. She called me capable. She said her son had done well. She told her friends I was the organized one, the reliable one, and she said it with a kind of pride that made me feel, genuinely, like part of the family. I held on to that feeling. I wanted to be part of the family. I had not had much of one growing up. In year 2, things shifted in a way I didn't fully recognize until later, the way you don't always notice a room getting darker because the change is slow enough that your eyes keep adjusting. The warmth started to come with conditions. My mother-in-law mentioned, casually, at a family birthday party, that her friend Denise's daughter-in-law had just hosted a beautiful Easter gathering at her house, and wasn't it nice when the younger generation stepped up like that? I smiled and said nothing. 2 weeks later, she mentioned it again. Different context, same point. Then she started mentioning Denise's daughter-in-law by name, Patrice. Patrice had done this. Patrice had organized that. Patrice had driven her to a medical appointment and brought flowers, and somehow also found time to refinish a credenza. I was not Patrice. I heard about Patrice for 8 months before I met her, and when I finally met her at Thanksgiving, I understood immediately that Patrice was not the point. Patrice was a mirror. My mother-in-law held Patrice up whenever she wanted me to see something she felt I was lacking, and what I was lacking, as far as I could tell, was a cheerful willingness to be present, available, decorative, and grateful without requiring anything in return, including acknowledgement. My husband noticed it too. He mentioned it once, gently, in a way that suggested he had already decided it wasn't worth confronting. He said his mother just had high standards. I said I understood. I did not say what I actually thought, which was that his mother had flexible standards high when they applied to me, negotiable when they applied to Marcus, and non-existent when they applied to herself. Marcus, by this point, had moved back into his mother's house. He was 34. He was working part-time at a friend's auto detailing shop. He was, by his own description, figuring things out. His mother spoke about him the way people speak about someone recovering from an illness with patience and softness, and an unspoken agreement that pressure would be cruel. She had never spoken about me with that softness. I was capable. I was organized. I was the kind of person who could handle things. She was not wrong. I could handle things. I handled quite a lot of things. In the spring of year 2, my mother-in-law's roof, the same roof they'd done partial work on with the original loan, developed a more serious problem. There was water damage. The contractor gave an estimate. My mother-in-law called my husband. My husband came to me. I looked at the estimate and looked at our savings account and did the math and said we could cover half, not all. My husband asked if I was sure. I said I was sure about half. We covered half. Marcus covered nothing. Nobody asked Marcus to cover anything. I noticed that. I wrote it down. I kept writing things down. In the spring of year 3, my husband was promoted. We celebrated, and his mother celebrated, and the celebration included a comment from her made lightly, almost as a joke, that now maybe we could finally help Marcus get his feet under him properly. The table laughed. My husband laughed. I smiled the smile I had developed by then, the one that reached my eyes just far enough to pass. That same month, without any formal conversation, Marcus began borrowing money from my husband directly. Small amounts, then larger ones. My husband mentioned it to me afterward, not before. I asked him to tell me when it happened going forward. He said I was being rigid. I said I was being a partner. We went to bed not speaking. By the time of that dinner in Naperville, the dinner with the wine and the toast, and the conspicuous absence of my name, I had added up everything we had contributed to my husband's family over 37 months. I had done it the night before, actually, not because I suspected the toast was coming, but because I had been doing a quarterly review of our finances, something I did every 3 months, the way some people do health checkups, and I had wanted to see the full picture in one place. The number was $43,600. I want to say that again, clearly, because I know some people in the comments will doubt it and I understand why. It doesn't sound real. But here is what $43,000 looks like when it accumulates slowly over 3 years. It looks like a loan payment here, a materials transfer there, a car insurance month, a vet bill, a roof contribution, a Marcus needs first and last month's rent advance that was never repaid, a we'll pay you back that stopped being said because it had been said enough times that everyone understood it was a formality. No single amount was devastating. They were all manageable. That's how it works. That's exactly how it works. I sat at that dinner table in Naperville, and I listened to my mother-in-law thank the family for showing up for her, and I held my fork, and I did not say a word. My husband squeezed my hand under the table. On the drive home, I looked out the passenger window the whole way. He didn't try to start a conversation until we pulled into our garage, and then he said he thought maybe his mom had just forgotten she'd had a lot of wine. She got flustered in front of people. She probably didn't mean it the way it came out. I said goodnight and went upstairs. I am not a person who makes decisions out of anger. I have seen what decisions made out of anger look like. I grew up in a house full of them. So I did what I always do when something important needs to be resolved. I let 3 days pass. I went to work. I came home. I cooked twice. I went for 2 runs. I slept. On the 4th day, I opened my laptop. The spreadsheet I had been maintaining wasn't complicated. It was a plain grid: date, description, amount, repayment status, notes. Green rows for amounts that had been repaid in full, yellow for partial, red for nothing. I spent about 90 minutes that evening going back through 3 years of bank statements to make sure every entry was accurate and cross-referenced. I added source documentation for everything I could find: bank transfer confirmations, text messages where my husband or his mother had described what a payment was for, the contractor estimate with our contributions circled. When I was done, I had a document that was 11 pages long when printed. I also had a number: $43,620. $20 from a gas station run I'd made for my mother-in-law when she was sick 2 Decembers ago and had asked me to stop on my way over. I had been going to leave that one out, but I decided no. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it completely. I printed it, all 11 pages. I put it in a manila envelope. I did not seal the envelope. I waited another 4 days. During those 4 days, my husband noticed I was quieter than usual. He asked once if I was okay. I said I was fine and that I had been tired from a project at work, which was partially true. He accepted that. I think, if I'm being honest, he was relieved to accept it. There are things people choose not to look at directly, and I believe my husband had been choosing not to look directly at the dynamic in his family for a long time. He loved his mother. He felt responsible for his brother. He had found, somewhere along the way, that it was easier to manage me than to confront them, because I was the one who would listen to reason and they were the ones who would make it painful. I am not saying this to make him the villain. He isn't. But he isn't not the villain either, and I had spent 3 years being too charitable about that distinction. On a Saturday morning, 9 days after the dinner in Naperville, I asked my husband to sit down at the kitchen table. I put the manila envelope in front of him. He looked at it. He looked at me. He asked what it was. I told him it was a record of every dollar we had given his family since we got married. I told him I wanted him to look at it. Not skim it, look at it. I told him I was going to make coffee and that I would be back in 10 minutes. I went to the kitchen and made coffee very slowly. When I came back, he was on page 4. He had not said anything. His face had a look I had not seen on it before, which was the look of a person in the middle of understanding something they had been successfully avoiding. He turned to page 5, page 6. He stopped on page 7 where I had written, in the notes column, a text message his mother had sent him in November of year 2, which he had shown me at the time, which said, and I quote, just roughly here, she had thanked him for the roof contribution, and said she didn't know what she'd do without him. Without him. Not us. Not me. He put the papers down. He said, quietly, that he hadn't realized it had added up to that. I said I knew he hadn't. He said he didn't know what to say. I said I wasn't asking him to say anything right now. I said I was asking him to know. I said there was a difference between a conversation and an accounting, and that this was an accounting, and that I needed him to hold the full accounting in his mind before we had the conversation. He nodded. I drank my coffee. Then I said, calmly, that I would not be contributing anything further to his family's financial needs going forward. Not a loan, not a payment, not a cosign, not a gas station, $20. I said this wasn't about anger. I said it was about the fact that 3.5 years of consistent financial contribution had not only gone unacknowledged at a family dinner, it had been actively eclipsed by the performance of gratitude toward people who had given far less, and I had sat there and held a fork and said nothing, and I was done holding the fork. He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked what I wanted to happen next. I said I wanted 2 things. The first was that he tell his mother and his brother that our financial support was ending, and that he tell them clearly, not as a suggestion or a maybe or a we'll see how things go, but as a fact. The second was that he think seriously, not that day, not under pressure, but genuinely about what kind of partner he wanted to be, and whether the way he had managed the last 3 years reflected that. He asked if I was saying our marriage was in trouble. I said I was saying our marriage needed honesty more than it needed comfort. He asked if I had already decided something. I said no. I said I was still there, sitting at that table, drinking that coffee. I said that was a choice I had made and was continuing to make, and that I needed him to understand it was a choice, not an inevitability, and that choices had conditions. He picked up the envelope and held it for a moment, and then he set it back down on the table between us. He said he would talk to his mother. I said thank you. He did talk to her. I don't know exactly what was said because I wasn't in the room, it was a phone call, and I sat upstairs with my book and let it be his conversation, because it needed to be his conversation. It lasted 40 minutes. When he came upstairs, he looked hollowed out in the way people look when they've said something true that they can't unsay. He told me his mother had not taken it well. He said she had cried. He said she had said some things about me, about how I had always kept myself apart from the family, how I was cold, how I had clearly been waiting to use this moment against them. He said Marcus had apparently been listening from the other room and had gotten on the call and said I had always had an agenda. My husband told me he had said, to both of them, that he did not agree. I looked at him for a moment. Then I said thank you again. It took about 6 weeks for the dust to settle into a new shape. We did not go to Sunday dinners for a month. My mother-in-law sent my husband 3 long text messages and 1 voice memo that I did not listen to and did not ask about. Marcus sent 1 short text that said nice work, Maya, with a period at the end that was meant to sting. It stung a little, I'll be honest. But I also got up the next morning and went to work and sat at my desk and did my job and transferred nothing to anyone. 3 months after the kitchen table conversation, my mother-in-law called my husband and, in her way, which was not direct and not exactly an apology but was at least a movement toward one, said that she had been thinking about the dinner in Naperville, and that she realized she had not thanked everyone she should have. She asked if we would come to Easter. My husband looked at me. I thought about it for a moment. I said yes. I said I would go to Easter. I said I would be warm and present, and I would bring a dish because I make a good sweet potato casserole, and I was not going to let this make me small. But I also did not bring the envelope. I left it on the shelf in our home office, where I had placed it after the kitchen table conversation. It sat there in its plain manila exterior, and it didn't need to go anywhere. It had already done what it needed to do. I've thought a lot, in the time since, about what it actually means to keep records. People hear spreadsheet and think cold. They think calculating. They think you were building a case from the beginning. I wasn't. I was keeping records because I believe that clarity is a form of respect for yourself, for your marriage, for the people you're dealing with. I wasn't waiting to use it. I was just keeping it, the way you keep a fire extinguisher, hoping you never need it, keeping it anyway. The thing about documentation is that it doesn't have to be loud. My mother-in-law expected me to either disappear quietly or explode publicly. Neither of those was available to her. What she got instead was 11 pages of dates and amounts and notes, handed to her son on a Saturday morning with a cup of coffee, in complete silence. He turned pale at page 4. That was enough. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself somewhere in it, maybe you're the person holding the fork. Maybe you're the person running the numbers late at night and feeling guilty about it. Maybe you're the person who just said yes one more time because it was easier. I want to say something to you directly. You are allowed to know what you have given. You are allowed to want that to be seen. The wanting doesn't make you cold. The spreadsheet doesn't make you calculating. The decision to stop, made quietly, without drama, without an audience, that's not cruelty. That's just knowing your own worth on paper and deciding, finally, that the paper was right. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I'll be reading. And if this hit close to home, you know what to do. I'll see you in the next one.